Well, I suppose the story goes back to when I met Dave. So, as many people will know, I'm actually also a physiotherapist. So, I qualified as a physio and then as a doctor, and now as a GP. And I met Dave when I was a physio and he had some elbow problems. We ended up realizing that we had quite a lot in common. We ended up staying in touch, and it took about 10 years before he approached me and said, "Ben, I know that you've always been interested in sports and exercise medicine, and it's something that I'm looking at now is to set up this supplement business." And having followed Dave for a long time, when he said that he wanted to set up a supplement business, I knew that it would happen, for one, and I knew it would be really good, for two. And I knew that it would be something that if he's asking me to be involved in, I was definitely going to grab with two hands. So that's essentially what happened. That's So one thing that I'll say about Dr. Paul is he's a total psycho. Running 100 miles. I wouldn't be surprised if he told me that he's run 100 miles every day for the last 10 years. And he is someone that, from a fitness and health perspective, I do admire, and someone that he would definitely be the first person on my contacts list that I would call if I needed some help devising a plan or having an idea of how to actually go about prepping myself for any sort of event, really. So whenever I'm in an interview and these sort of questions come up, the main words that come to mind are integrity, pragmatism, responsibility. And I think that all of these, you can make an argument for dozens and dozens of words and values that are important to you. With Nuvictus, integrity is certainly important. We want to make sure that people recognise that we're out to try and do the best for them. That's what my role is as a doctor on the day-to-day. I want to see what the problems are and see if we can find some good solutions to those problems. But when I talk about responsibility, it's not the responsibility of me to change your life 100%. I'd like to support people in making changes, but give people the ability to take responsibility and to take some ownership of that. And that's really important from a healthcare perspective. We want to try and educate people in. So shared responsibility, integrity, and from my perspective, progress and growth, as I've already mentioned. As people will be aware, I hope, Nuvictus doesn't just sell products. We try to also get people involved in our community so we can keep the ball rolling. And hopefully as the ball rolls, it gathers pace and we can really make some good progress. But also we offer blood testing, which can be quite hard to come by generally in the health system, because there are some barriers to entry in that respect, especially for the sort of people who might feel that they don't want to burden the doctor because they don't have an actual problem, but they would like to keep an eye on their health, track what metrics are going wrong or going right in many ways as well. So yeah, with Nuvictus, we offer that. We have products which I believe are the best out there. We have blood work available as well, which allows people to monitor their health on a regular basis. And then we have all of the educational resources and support resources that come with the community as well. Whew, that's a toughie. Right, okay, let me have a think about that. Yeah, that was a tough one, and I did need some time to think about that when you furnished me that question earlier. So we have lots of wins in medicine. I mean, I see almost 50 patients a day, and you find you have really good and really bad encounters sometimes, which you reflect upon and you think, well, how can I make that better next time? Some of the best encounters that I've had are where I've listened to. I'm picturing 2 or 3 specific patients where we've chatted for a long period of time. I've given them far more than the 10 minutes that were allotted in general practice, because I felt they needed it. But actually, a lot of it was just listening to what the problems are, listening to what their issues and what they perceive their solutions to be, and the best moments where I felt where a patient has walked out and has asked me, "What's your name? I want to know so I can book you next time I come in." Those are the ones that really sort of sit in my head. The 2 or 3 people specifically, where we've just sat for 20, 30 minutes at a time sometimes, and we just let people talk. And what that sort of has taught me is that a lot of the time people know what their problems are, and sometimes they even know what the solutions are as well, but they just need that support to actually get from A to B. I think that there's an expectation. There's an expectation in the world, certainly in the UK at least, that the kind of person that you are between the ages of 11 and 16 kind of dictates how you'll end up. For me, it was probably between 16 and 18 where I was all the most disappointed with my progress in life. And looking back on it, I always saw that as a little bit of a block, because I didn't do as well as I'd like to have done. And I don't talk about it often, and now I'm putting it out in the social media sphere. This is good. But ultimately, I was disappointed with how I did, but because I knew that I was better. But sometimes, actually, I look back and just think, well, maybe actually some of that difficulty ended up meaning that I was able to do. I was able to work hard to achieve my goals, and ultimately, I was able to turn that around, and I ended up getting a degree, going to medical school, becoming a doctor, and got lots of things going on at the minute. But yeah, I think that ultimately I suppose my lesson that I would try and teach other people is that your past doesn't necessarily have to dictate your future, and it's never really too late to turn the tables and actually reinvent yourself if need be. When we first started, we wanted to try and create a piece of content that would actually help people to start seeing exactly what we're about. And we created the 5 Pillars of Health ebook. And writing that was such a pleasure, because it meant that I was able to really sort of lay out what the really important things of health and performance actually are, and maybe to start giving people some really good sort of like structure into how to actually make a difference. But one thing I've noticed is that actually by working with Paul and Dave, there are some things where I just took it for granted from a medical perspective, but having a multidisciplinary team, we were able to then hone that, polish that, and actually realise that actually there's more to it than just the medical side, and to try and expand that out. And so what I would say, what do I bring to Nuvictus? I bring the medical side, but that is only 1/3 of the piece of the puzzle. And ultimately, I think that by the 3 of us working strongly together, we cover the majority of bases, and the bases that we don't cover, we can easily we anticipate getting lots of people in for podcasts and trying to really answer some really niche questions going forwards. It's interesting. I think that as someone who hasn't spent much time in business before, I've had to learn very quickly, and it's been great because it's something that I've always wanted to do, but I've always spent a lot of time doing medicine and learning and consulting and teaching, which is why I think it was always so great to sort of be surrounded by Dave, who's learned a lot of lessons in business and seems to know what he's talking about. I suppose when we first set out to set up Nuvictus in, I think it was sort of early last year, I think I was probably expecting it to be live in a month. That's probably the main thing that I was learning. It's like business is hard, and there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to make things happen. And so what I would say to people is that we want to support you, and we really hope that you support us in starting this and making a real big difference in a lot of people's lives. And so, yeah, I think that the amount of work behind the scenes is probably the thing that surprised me the most. But as you know, it's been good because it's a lot of lessons learned, and as I've already said before, I like progress and I like growth, and I think that that can only be a benefit. Yeah, so I suppose doctors never stop being doctors, right? I mean, you go to work, and I think people would think that that you start work at a certain time and you finish at a certain time, and that's it. But actually, you get home and you've still got your friends calling you, asking you what this thing is and what that thing is, and you don't stop really. It's a profession where if we were to turn around and say, you need to pay me for that, then I think that you'd lose friends quite quickly, probably. um, but no, I spend a lot of my time wanting to help. As someone who's got kids now, young children, I've got a lot of friends who've also got young children. It's just the way it works. When you have kids, you meet lots of other people with kids, and so I spend a lot of time discussing ailments of other people's kids, which is great actually, because it means that from an educational point of view, it's brilliant, because a lot of the things that people bring their children into the GP about, a lot of it's anxiety and a lot of it's worry, and by educating parents, you can cut down on the amount of times they then feel the need to have to come in and see you. So it's quite nice to educate people on children's hydration, children's breathing problems, and really make sure that parents feel more comfortable in managing these sort of things. And that's what I quite like doing. You.
And why?
There's a lot of reasons why. I'd be worried that you'd take him out for a 50-mile jog every single day, and by the time I got back, there'd be nothing left of him. So, one thing I've realised recently is I do attack things completely differently to others based on my frame of reference. So I am a doctor. When you go on to when I used to work on wards, the way that I used to try and set up the patients for the day is highlight what the problems are on a numbered list, highlight what the current solutions are that we're going through, make sure that we're not missing any of the problems out. We're trying to sort of tackle each individual one, and then write what the progress is so far. And I realised relatively recently that actually that's a really good way of approaching life. I probably work like that a lot. I like to have a think about what the problems are, and then try and correspond solutions based on each individual problem, and then you check your progress each day. And from the health perspective, that's how I expect to be able to try and teach people going forwards within Nuvictus from their own personal perspective, but also probably teaching that actual process may well be useful as well. I don't think many people think in that specific terms, in the way that we lay it out and diarise that, and then reflect on that, look back and see where the progress is and how things are going. So that's an important way that I work, and I think that it would be a nice, probably refreshing change to a lot of people who may have used other services.